Thomas, we have a lot to talk about. What would you like me to start with first?
Anything, Betsy, because it's all equally crazy.
Okay, so I'm going to fire away. I've got a list of notes. Let's start off with that Twitter rampage from POTUS today about Syria. What in the world does he mean when he says we'll only fight wars that we win?
Well, that's because look at who we were fighting there. So let's, again, give a backdrop, frame this Syrian mess, especially in relationship to, I don't even know a name, but you have to consider Erdogan crazy. Erdogan imagines that he's going to reestablish the Ottoman Empire while being a member of NATO, while being a friend of Putin, while creating amazing concessions for Russia in Syria. So what's really going on in Syria? Let's reiterate this. Syria and the king of Syria is no king. His father was placed there by the CIA, and he was a butcher, massacred people to get to the position he was in. Bashir al-Assad basically created what we call ISIS or ISIL as the Al-Qaeda. Remember when he invited everyone, all Al-Qaeda members, to come to Syria? He would give them money, weapons, arm them, and send them into Iraq to fight against Americans. Well, that was one thing. But then when they all came back into Syria afterwards, and then some Al-Qaeda remained in Iraq, we'll get to the Kurds in a second, but some of those then basically they became mercenaries. And so they turned against him. And so there became 5-6 different factions in Syria. No one could even tell who was fighting who in some cases, and in many cases the mercenaries would simply change sides depending upon who was winning the battle so that they wouldn't get killed. And we, through our support of Iraq, unfortunately ended up supporting Al-Qaeda right until the end, until Trump came in and said, no, wipe them out. And what did you notice? In a matter of a very short period of time, basically Al-Qaeda wiped out of Iraq, and ISIS wiped out of Syria, but you can't wipe out all the different factions. We were giving $1 billion a year through Obama's administration to the people who were fighting against the king of Syria. Now, it goes back to oil pipelines, as we've described before, and even once Russia got there, and even remember China sent a troop carrier there twice to the area. We thought they were filled with troops, but they were actually really stealing people from Turkey, basically slaves. Erdogan sold them into slavery. So we get to see that Russia set up a base there, right next to the American base across, just across the border. So we have bases in Turkey, quite a few bases, and we have listening bases in Turkey at Karamsel and other places. So Erdogan is nuts, and that's the reason he went after Gulen Fethullah, saying because he was more religiously oriented and not so secular as Erdogan. Erdogan wants to create his kingdom, but he wants to take the best out of the fascism of radical Islamic terrorism and merge it with what he thinks is NATO diplomacy and global diplomacy by, literally having special deals under the table with Putin.
Look, he's just watching all these people around the world, like your Joe Bidens and your oligarchs everywhere, getting a piece of the action. He wants a piece for himself.
Yes, he got the piece because the second that Bashir al-Assad talked to the High Commissioner for Refugees from the United Nations, and he said, once you have put X number of people into refugee status and they've crossed over into Turkey, we will start giving you billions of dollars. Now, that didn't hurt even the oil, because the oil is being stole by the PKK and by the anti-Syrian forces, which we supported, we supported actually 3 different ones of them. One from 3 different groups in America. The State Department supported one, the CIA supported one, and the Department of Defense supported one of these rebel groups in Syria. Well, the whole nonsense that we, as Trump points out in his tweet, that we got into that because of some, which we pointed out to you, lies from the Five Eyes community directly from England and from France, all lies about the gas attack, the multiple gas attacks, and about the inhumane things that Bashir al-Assad was doing in Syria. That's all been proven to be complete nonsense. There were no gas attacks at all. There weren't even gas releases. So what was going on there? That's just a stage for keeping your attention away from something else. So you have to ask, what else is going on there? Here's what's going on. The Kurds in Kurdistan know that they're going to be treated by Erdogan exactly the way that the Turks treated the Armenians. A total pogrom. Total annihilation, total genocide. That's what's going to happen, folks. So when you hear that Erdogan is going into North Syria, no, that's not what's going on at all. Because who's in North Syria? The ones that, the PKK. And the PKK, that is a left-wing political fascist group from the Kurds that wants to get their own piece of the pie. And they control one of the major pipelines, and they drain off of it, and then they pull it back into Kurdistan and take it in a variety of different ways. But basically, there's oil being stolen in Syria, both by Erdogan at the port, and the Russians get their piece of the pie, the Israelis get their piece of the pie. That's right, even as Israel gets oil from Syria. And then in the northern part, the part that they diverted out of Iraq and now have put back into Iraq, is the PKK stealing from the northern fields the oil. Now, Erdogan wants that oil. So he's using the excuse that he's going to go into Syria to get ISIS. Well, ISIS is gone. And so that's the reason Trump has merged these different concepts together. Because remember, Trump is manipulating world leaders by his tweets. So what he's saying is the following. You lying piece of manure, President Erdogan. We know you helped create the nonsense in Syria. We know that you funded the very people that you said you were fighting against. We know that you never bombed any of the oil lines, which would have stopped the war, the pipelines. From the beginning, you and Russia and Syria and America never bombed those pipelines. Isn't that interesting? And the fact that we, Americans, gave weapons to Turkey, gave weapons to the PKK, to everybody. We gave weapons to everybody, and then they all got shifted around. So what does he want? He wants the heavy equipment that's there that the PKK has, because they're the only real fighters that ever did any serious damage on anybody in Syria, except for dropping some bombs in some areas. So, is Russia getting involved? No. Why did Trump do what he did? He basically is saying, Erdogan, you're a nutcase. You're in NATO. Don't forget that. We're not going to support you, because when you get attacked, either by Russia, by China, by Syria, by Iran, by Iraq, anybody would have the right to come in, anybody, literally any Muslim country or theocracy or anybody.
Okay, but we can all see through this, Thomas. It's just the banksters and you warmongers trying to start war. That's what this is.
Yes, and Trump won't do it.
And Trump sees right through it, as do all Americans that are awake, and people around the world see it. We are just tired of these proxy wars all over the world that we never win. And it really bothers me. We never win the wars. So I began to look. Well, there's a reason. Because if we're in constant war, the bankers walk away with a whole lot of money.
Absolutely. Now, Fethullah Gulen, or...
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
Gulen,
yeah.
Fethullah,
is he still running these charter schools, indoctrinating these children? He's using U.S. taxpayer money to indoctrinate children in public schools about this.
And basically stealing money and demanding that the teachers who teach there remit the money back to the school.
Separating the girls and the boys in some kind of crazy religious thing.
Oh, it's completely radical Islamic
Wrapping
terrorism.
Those girls up in their burqas.
And Erdogan has accused the United States of protecting him because he's in Pennsylvania. He's ancient. He should be dying any minute. But he started these movements throughout the world because he's very famous, charismatic, and he started schools and all these different movements. Basically, he's just a terrorist. Let's just be real clear about this. Why are we protecting him?
Why are we giving him taxpayer dollars?
That is a crime, and we have done intelligence report on that, asking that the FBI look into it.
The FBI. You think the FBI would do anything?
Which is very strange, because shortly thereafter, the FBI raided his compound twice.
Well, they probably
found nothing.
Well, they probably went in because there was something good in there to get.
It was just
Or was
Possibly for blackmail, but basically they did it to exonerate
Excuse
him.
me? Have anybody out here noticed any crime that the FBI has solved? What happened in Las Vegas at the Mandalay? Citizens out here are still waiting. What happened in San Bernardino? Still waiting. The FBI, seems to me, is just running false flags and then covering it up when they can't show you the real issue, which is the FBI.
The Federal Bureau of Incompetence. But they're not really incompetent. They're covering their own crimes. And they're so busy at it.
Yes.
But they don't do a good job.
Under their own roof in Washington are the major crimes of the century, and no one in the FBI can figure it out.
Now, with Gulen Fethullah Gulen, whichever it is, I can't remember. Because I don't want to remember, because it's so open that the FBI went there, gathered up all the incriminating information, and brought it back and held it where they always hold it, in the FBI for blackmail. And so what happened? We did the intelligence report on this, and we showed these schools, and we showed Hezmet and the whole thing. Then Erdogan, then the FBI goes and twice goes after Gulen's compound. And then Erdogan gets involved and says that there was a coup against him and that it was all Gulen's people. No, that isn't what happened, but I'm sure part of that is true. So Erdogan gets money for every refugee that's there. And he has the greatest number of refugees of anyone from the Syrian, whatever you'd want to call it. Now, it's going to be a civil war again. But let's just get to the point. Erdogan wants the northern part of Iraq, where the Kurds live. They happen to be good fighters, and they happen to be well equipped because they've taken the American equipment, as I've mentioned, billions of dollars worth of American equipment, and they use it. So you look at it and go, well, how did that happen? Because John McCain went there and gave it to them. Remember, John McCain was anything but an American. He was a war actor. He is a criminal, and he was our enemy. And we have pictures of him working with all the different groups and coming back and then insisting that we send them airplanes and all kinds of equipment, every kind of equipment imaginable. He never stopped. The whole Syrian war, he never stopped for 1 second. And he worked behind the scenes on everybody's side. Well, Erdogan, Recep Erdogan has to be put in place by Trump. And so he was just now put in place. And Trump said, forget the NATO treaty alliance. I'm not going to honor it because you're not an honorable person. Don't try to fool me with the Kurds. I know who the PKK are, and they are not Kurds. They are fascists from all over who come to say that they're fighting as Kurds for the PKK. What were they really? Just the most effective mercenaries in most cases, and also the most extreme fascist from Kurdistan, which is where Al-Qaeda was. And so we are talking about the PKK might as well be some of the best fighters from Al-Qaeda.
Well, who funds these people? Is it the CIA, or is it who's doing the money?
The money?
Yeah, where's it coming from?
Well, you might not like this, but it was discovered that good old Bashar al-Assad, even when his pipelines were working, he was making about $4 billion a year, but a war makes him anywhere 11, 12 billion or more a year in donations from the United Nations, from Turkey. Even the Vatican gets their share of those funds as they're being doled out for refugees. And then they found out that a group of 5 Muslim-centered countries is giving billions of dollars. The EU gives billions of dollars to him. The EU gives billions of dollars to the man we're fighting against, supposedly there. That's the reason that every time in the past that we've ever tried to describe this, it is so extraordinarily complicated that no one can tell who is firing on who at one point.
And that's exactly what they want. They want it so that you don't know what's going on, so they can continue to do it, and they continue to make money. The people of the world do not need any more of this war and conflict.
In the Battle of Idlib and thereafter, there were numerous situations where all 3 of the fighting forces were American-sponsored.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when this was found out, this is unbelievable. They dropped leaflets telling them that they knew this. and who each of the factions were and who was paying for it. And what happened? They dropped their American weapons and fled to another city. And that was to the last stronghold of ISIS. Now, what Trump is saying is, all of you countries who told us to get into this war, that would be France and Britain and Germany and Turkey and NATO and everybody else, told America to get into this crazy civil war, which was basically started by the very king of that country against America. So we went there to depose him, but in the end, we ended up paying for all sides of the war. In other words, we just paid for sheer chaos. And basically, sometimes Bashar al-Assad was telling the absolute truth, and he didn't do what they accused him of doing. So what Trump has done is absolute genius. No more wars, people. You're not going to trick me. Five Eyes, sit on it. Germany and all you, NATO, sit on it. I am not your hammer. I am not your weapon. I am not your AR-15 that you're going to have me shooting people because you tell me that they're bad. We know who's bad. Turkey's bad, and if they don't get out of NATO, then NATO needs to close.
Okay, another piece that people keep emailing me about, and I have just, because it's like, oh, please, can't people read what's going on? But they believe the fear mongers in the internet. And this is about the Marines deploying in the United States. And everybody's just, up in arms about what's going on with it. Thomas, clear it up for us.
The Marine Reserves are being activated. Now, so what? So there was an executive order on it. So what? We're in a national emergency. Did people forget that? We actually have multiple national emergencies at this moment that Trump is contending with. He's already sent and activated the National Guard, basically for the first time in a long time, there was a national emergency that caused the Department of Defense to be able to be activated here in America, even to use some of their funds to build a wall. And the DEA needed assistance. And so what happened was you had every available force being sent to the southern border, and every one of them would have had an executive order or the order from the president stating so.
Talk to people. Tell them why we need all of this military down there at the border.
Oh, well, that's because right now you have thousands of Mexican troops on the border fighting the cartels. And the cartels, we've already seen the death of two of them recently, the entire cartel. And remember, Mexico is ran by cartels, period. And the war on the border is that heavy equipment that's being used, that came from Eric Holder. So the people dying by the thousands.
I think we glossed over that. The heavy equipment that's being used by the cartels, by the Mexican army.
Yes.
Who? Which ones? The cartels?
Cartels.
That were sent there
by Eric Holder.
By Eric Holder, and all of this gun running that Eric Holder did.
Whoever his favorite cartel was, he gave endless weapons to fight the other cartels so that he could get his cut, his pay. Remember, when you see Pelosi and the gang going anywhere where there's problems, that's because they're going for their payoff, their inside payoff, one way or the other, whether it's cash to an offshore account or influence that is called upon later. It doesn't matter, but you always see who? The senior people who are multimillionaires who shouldn't be on the salary that they're on, so old that their teeth fall out of their head as they're talking and they don't know they're on the drugs for Alzheimer's. And they're, in some cases, literally the rapists like Al Green, who is accusing Trump of wrongdoing. Why? Because he's afraid Trump will reveal who he is. So what's going on the southern border is involving every aspect of Homeland Security, DEA, you name it, and now all the services, Coast Guard, everyone. And so the big deal is this was a reserve, Marines, which they don't usually call on. Now, what is the deal? Why do both sides, far left and far right, claim that this is a big deal? Here is why. Those people on the far right, beyond MAGA, those who just are hoping with their opium dreams that there's going to be a military tribunal and he's going to bring in the Marines because the Marines answer directly to the president as the commander-in-chief, even within the borders of America. They're there to protect him on what's called land, sea, and air. And they are always the first to be called, the first in, last out. So why are they being called up now? Just simply because they're needed on the border, because he's got the funds, they've been released, and they're moving forward. And the votes on the both from the Senate, the traitors, the rhinos in the Senate, and the crazy Democrats, demon rats down there in the House, have said there is no national emergency on the southern border, which is completely insane. But it has slowed down. Why? Because Trump said to the new president of Mexico, who is in the hands of the cartels, who has literally paid off many, many people on Capitol Hill in the Washington District of Crime. What is going on there is Trump said, sorry, I'm going to close the border like I did, where you lost untold amounts of money for me just closing the border for a few days. I'm going to close the whole border, he said, unless you stop your cartels on our southern border. Tijuana is the most dangerous city in the world at this moment. There are more deaths there than any place else, even Chicago, than the rest of the world. You know, Rahm Emanuel created the mess in Chicago, by the way. And who supported the caravans? Groups in Chicago. That's where the mafia is run, in case people didn't know, and that's the reason Hillary Clinton's
Leo Zagami knows.
Yes, Leo was pointing this out. You know, Hillary Clinton's dad was one of the mafia bosses, and it's to this day Rahm Emanuel and the most corrupt Mayor Daley. Hello, the most corrupt political machine in U.S. history in Chicago. We can't expect much more. But in Tijuana, we have the same thing, and along the entire southern border, complete lawlessness. The Marines have been called to support that. Now, the left thinks that they've been called because they're going after Trump. Okay. And the right, far right, thinks that they've been called because Trump is going after them. It is neither. And I will lay a nickel on that one. And I've been right about this. When these other orders were done before and people had the same opinion. For instance, let's go back to Turkey for a second. Trump already with Gulen Fethullah, when Erdogan said, you give him up to me or else. And he threatened him with everything. What he's threatening is now, Erdogan's threats, nothing compared to what the threats were before. What did Trump say? I ain't doing nothing. Because Trump had already sent the FBI in and gathered up all the evidence. So he now has the blackmail on Gulen, and he knows that he's keeping him as ineffective in America. If Gulen goes back to Turkey, there is civil war. If he goes to any one of his places where he's literally seen as a messiah, there could be problems. Some consider him to be the Mahdi, the Messiah, you see. So you want to keep the Messiah of the Muslims out of Damascus, or that means the end times are here. So that's the reason that we keep him in Pennsylvania in a nice compound and protect him with the FBI. Trump knows that. So that was what was happening. And so what Trump is doing now is don't even. He's going to, sorry to have to use the word, I won't use it. He'll slap him. He's slapping Erdogan again, you see. And Trump is absolutely genius. He's saying to all of them, I'm not getting involved in your stupid Syrian war. Why do you think they didn't do the last poison bombs, gas bombs in Syria, which they knew they had set up? We were warning everybody, it's happening. The white helmets are there. The people have already been killed. They already gassed a neighborhood near there. They brought the bodies over.
Okay.
It didn't happen. Why?
Right.
Because we called them out. Trump is calling them out and saying, you are not pulling me into this war. Calling Iran out, you're not pulling me into that war. Calling North Korea out, you're not pulling me into that war. And threatening to get a nuclear bomb is not going to affect me. What did Trump do? He did what we always tell you he did. He put economic sanctions on them. So he just said to Erdogan, the crazy man, I will take down your economy in the blink of an eye, basically. Not in those words. And he's correct.
I know you could go on and on about that. I did want to mention the reason I called Leo Zagami's name out is because I was just watching an interview or a discussion, I should say, that he and John Barnwell had, and you will want to go see it because they have a great discussion going on how communists eat babies and other sordid blood rituals. Did you have anything to say about that video? Speak to John and to Leo, please.
Oh, Leo Zagami, I love you. I want to have you in my home. I want one just like you. You are from the moment John ever sent me the first video of you. Just love you. I don't care what you're talking about. Just because you're so fresh, your heart is so pure, and it's so on fire for the good. So that's great. And John, well, we know John. John is he's irreplaceable. He's indefatigable in his research, and seldom ever can we find John Barnwell making a mistake? And this is what we want, people that we can trust.
Okay, now I want to move on to a tweet that POTUS did today, and he is boasting 5G. And I'm just going to say, folks, President Trump does not want to bring harm to Americans, and he certainly doesn't want to kill us through 5G genocide. He is being poorly advised by somebody in his administration that this 5G stuff is good. We have, if you've been on the CAT report, we have sent you lots of articles where countries around the world are stopping this madness. But here we have Donald Trump tweeting out, go 5G. What we need you to do as information warriors is go into the description box. I have a contact page. You need to contact the White House and educate Trump and his staff. Let's not assume that they know all about it. Let's assume they don't, and let's do a better job educating and enlightening them. If you feel like you can't get through to Donald Trump's office directly, find a way to send it to Stephen Miller.
Yes, Betsy, his tweet was about net neutrality and that they won in their lawsuit, and they did. Now, net neutrality is anything but net neutrality. And when you see a word like that, it's like seeing the name of a George Soros non-governmental organization. It's the opposite of what it is. It wasn't net neutrality. It was basically saying that the people who use the internet the most don't have to pay any more than us little people who use it a little bit. Completely absurd. Of course they have to pay. And now that they want to say that they are not just a neutral platform, which would have made them kind of like, a government monopoly utility, which is what they're now asking to be turned into. Oh, no. Now they're broadcasters, and they get to squelch free speech, and they get to squelch conservatives. And who are they really? Mainstream media. And who's that? The opposition party to MAGA. And they, in other words, they were globalists. So let's just call them what they are. They're internationalists. They're people who
They're
believe,
mouthpieces for the Pilgrim Society.
And especially mouthpieces.
They're crown agents. And along with them is senior executive service. And Stephen Miller came out. I heard a Breitbart piece on, and he called the bureaucracy out for what it is, described it in every bit. Stephen, start saying the words, senior executive service. It's time that more Americans woke up to Obama's stay-behind army that's thwarting the will of the people and obstructing our president. Y'all people out there in the media, they're never going to say it. So we expect people in the Trump administration, Mitt Mulvaney too, start telling the American people who this entity is.
And get your legislative assistants to give us a call. We'll write it for you. You need to create legislation ending the SES. It was created temporarily to help with integrating information technology at the highest levels of the government. You don't need it anymore. It needs to go away. And all aspects of it are literally, they're discriminatory and they need to go away. So yes, you're absolutely right. Steve, get it together. We know you know this. Now, let me go on with 5G, and let me just tell you what's really going on. I have been reluctant to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. First off, we don't want net neutrality. What we want, we don't want that law any way that it's written, because it can be interpreted 180 degrees opposite by lawyers.
Well, that's what lawfare is.
What we want is whoever uses it pays for it. You pay for it going in, you pay for your use, either you pay up front going in if you're a big company, or you pay for your use as you go along, and we need to stop subsidizing.
Wait a minute. But before everybody pays for it, let's make sure to steal the original trade secrets of how it all works. We're going to steal that first. Then everybody else can make money off of it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. There are only 3 companies who have the 5G technology, and China, through Huawei, stole it from them.
Well, I was referring to Leader Technologies.
I understand that, but China also took IBM Eclipse Foundation, which stole Leader Technologies' trade secrets, and they've now made it 2.0. They call it open power, and it's running out of China. And China was going to take over the world's 5G through Huawei, and Trump said no. If you even have any dealings with them, we're not going to have dealings with you. So he basically put sanctions on them. So that basically makes Britain no longer part of the Five Eyes because, hey, their entire system can be hacked through 5G because it overrides all other systems. It becomes the carrier wave. Everything else becomes, well, I'm not going to get into the details of it. That's what I used to do, breaking out signals and finding ways to decode them. So it's easy. So you cannot have a secure system once you have 5G put in, period. No such thing. And we don't have one now anyway. We have so many stingrays all throughout Washington, D.C., even if you have encrypted phones, it doesn't matter. The Chinese, the Russians, anybody. The Russians aren't that interested. They're trying to build their country. They got their own problems. What they're interested in, who's interested in this? Israel. Who's interested in changing the laws and then being ahead of the laws? Lawyers, corporations. That's who's spying on us. So 5G gives complete capacity to spy on everybody. It gives complete capacity for the robot warriors to be used in America to gather up guns. It's the robot horses and robot dogs. They're already bulletproof. They are armored.
Because these robots, another way to look at them, it's pure will force without morality.
Absolutely. It's like a gun.
No, a gun has morality behind it.
It can defend, yes. But the concept that robot's going to defend us.
But the person using the gun, right? They can choose right and wrong. But these robots that run the way they describe it, eventually on artificial intelligence, what's behind this? They can take those robots, knock down your door, take you and your family, put you in an autonomous driving car and send you to a FEMA camp. And if this sounds outrageous, all this technology is available. It's about the morality of the people we are, whether this happens or not.
The Chinese said you could only have one child. So if you had two, they came and collected it and killed the baby. So the common people would just simply put their children out in the forest to die. And this is not uncommon. At one point they said no more cats, and from one day to the next, all cats were killed in China because they said they ate too much food. This is the kind of robotic thinking that you don't even need a robot for. They come to your house. Of course, you don't have weapons in China. You can't even have a bad thought. You can't have a bad look on your face now. You have to have facial recognition even to get onto the internet, and your social credit score has to be high, or you can't surf the internet. You can't access anything. And if one of your friends happens to get a bad social score, and you contact them and you don't know it, well, you go down the tubes too. Doesn't matter. They're killing millions of Uyghur Muslims by supposedly vocational camps. Now, what is 5G? 5G is already installed in Britain. 5G started to be installed in Europe until it started killing everything. Plants, animals, bees, humans were going crazy. Here in America, there's 21 targeted cities. 7 already have it installed, and they're getting lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit.
And
do
Donald
we think
Trump
Trump doesn't know this? No, hang on.
Okay.
Of course Trump knows this. Here's what's going on. He has to have full military, 5G, 6G, 10G, whatever, it doesn't matter. That's military. And he already has 5G, which is weaponized. It's called active denial. He knows that. He's had it demonstrated. We all see it on the television. And this is just what they show us, let alone what he's shown about what's really going on. So don't think for one second he doesn't know that. Here's what's really going on. And I've said this over and over again. And I don't think, first off, he knows that people right now are so addicted to their devices that that's the reason he said speed. Because people think that they need more speed with these devices. The devices are already faster than they can conceive, and they don't need any more speed. They need to slow their lives down and stop trying to be the speed of a machine and come back to being the speed of your heartbeat. But he knows this. He knows people are addicted. He knows he can't get them off. He knows the addictions of humans. He played on it with everything that he did in his life. He knows how to manipulate crowds. He knows how the crowds are manipulated. He absolutely knows 5G is bad. But until there are lawsuits, there's not even an agency that will take this up. There's not an agency that can take it up until the lawsuits start rolling in and they hit federal courts. And they won't.
Federal courts? Like little old Missy Amy Berman Jackson? Will she get it? Tell us about that wench.
Well, every time you get something assigned to a federal court, they already know the outcome.
Right.
So these 5G cases will be assigned. But hey, look at that. Down where the rich people live, They won their lawsuits. They're not having 5G installed.
Yeah, that's where Donald Trump and Rush Limbaugh, they're all down there. They don't have the 5G.
We poor people?
Us?
Oh, no.
Now, folks, when you see one of those things, those towers sitting in front of your yard, you need to protect your family.
The day after he is reelected, he will probably put a moratorium on 5G. And the reason is because by then the lawsuits will have amassed enough that he can take action, just like he waited for 16,000 complaints about people being squelched on the on internet and social media. And now look at all the insanity as it just explodes, implodes.
It's worse out there. It is worse out there. The censorship is ravenous.
But you see people like Mark Zuckerberg coming out and releasing his 2 hours of secret meeting stating he's not going to let anybody, Elizabeth Warren or anyone, take him to the mat because why? He's going to fight for his... No. Weeks before, he said the opposite. So why are they turning? They're turning because they know they're defeated. But Mark didn't know this. Mark has known nothing. Mark is he's given a little tiny card. And that's all. He reads it. That's all he can handle in his brain. That's why he can't answer a question after the one question. He can only answer one question at a time, and then he can only answer what's on the card. Why? That card is going to be different every few weeks. And one thing's for sure, if you listen to him speak, you know he was MK Ultra mind bleached.
That's why the audio came out in all these different pieces, because all he is capable of doing is reading these little pieces. But
now,
you digress. I know you go for it.
5G. Trump doesn't give a care about 5G. Do you think Trump uses 5G? Do you think Trump cares about 5G? No, he cares about military supremacy and then not to use it. Don't forget, folks, he's built up our military to do what? Not use it. He got the Chinese out of all of our military equipment so that they couldn't basically manipulate us, that we were 1 inch away from China taking us over. And so we got China out of the 5G business in America, but they gave $50 billion to these companies who are laying the lines, but the lines and putting out the antennas. Now, what is that about? Trump is not going to use those antennas for 5G. You can use lower frequencies with those very same antennas and only install, they're going to install 300,000 of them now on top of the ones we already have. Well, people don't understand that there's a huge swath of America that doesn't even get wireless. So Trump was told that all of our military is based upon, well, I don't know if I can say this. I can probably say it because it has been in the news. There are 17 satellites with super routers on them that control our full spectrum military. So wherever we're active in military, he can put those satellites there and he can tell if a mouse is scratching its ear. He can also do all kinds of things to people on the ground, from active denial beams that can simply make them all pass out, go collect all their guns if you want. When they wake up, they have no more weapons. Or he could do whatever. That's the reason he doesn't want to drop bombs. He knows he's got better equipment. So he was told this because Eric Schmidt put it there. Eric Schmidt had this contract, and it was one of the first contracts that Apple had to turn into, that Google had to turn into Alphabet. I won't go into that, but that's the reality. It's been in the news. Eric Schmidt bragged about this. Now, there's satellites being launched on a regular basis, sending up these 5G satellites in space, right? So Trump is told that that's going to take a long, long time. And Trump wants what? He wants every American to be able to read his tweets. Let's just be real frank about this. He won last time because of that, and he's going to win this time because of that, or other social media. He wants that because he knows that all the color revolutions were all, in the past few years, all manipulated through social media. And literally, it can take one person to create a color revolution. What happened in Iran was from one Iranian dissident. That's the reason they just clicked off the internet there. And that's the reason all these radical countries want their own intranet, including Russia, China. North Korea got their own through Eric Schmidt. Iran has its own now, and Turkey has its own. Turkey turns off all the social media overnight, anytime it wants, okay? But we can't do that in America for radical Islamic terrorists? No, we can't even close their sites down. So He knows that he wants people to vote for him. And so if he tells the people out there in the world that he's going to give them what they are digitally drooling for, which is more speed, though they can't handle the speed they have, it doesn't matter. That's like telling a junkie, you can't have any more junk. No, you can't turn America off right now to 5G. They all believe an artificial intelligence, superior mechanical intelligence is coming to rule us all. And most of these zombies, these digital zombies, these cyber zombies, they want that. Just like you hear Mark of the Zuckerberg saying, take me over, I'm out of control. Same thing with the addicts in the cyber world.
Well, I still think that we need to educate the Trump administration on 5G and encourage patriots out there to do what you can to educate you, your audience, and the administration on the dangers of 5G. Let's not assume that Thomas is correct on this.
Bring lawsuits.
Bring everything. That we run this country. We only have this problem because we stood down and allowed these thugs to take over. Let's talk about a thug. Let's talk about Amy Berman Jackson.
Oh, you mean Robert Mueller's bitch?
No, his winch.
A winch.
Oh, his bitch.
Bitch. No, she's a junkyard dog.
Yeah,
she's a female junkyard dog.
Yeah,
so when I say bitch, I don't mean that negative term. I mean she is a dog.
She's a hag.
She is a junkyard dog that will bite you and eat you.
Yes, don't forget that name. Amy Berman Jackson.
She
Bad
tried
news.
to accuse Robert Stone of threatening her because a friend of Robert's put up a picture of her that had what looked to be crosshairs in the back, which was really a Celtic cross.
But that's because she's an idiot as well as a judge.
Precisely.
That she doesn't know the difference.
Anyone who Robert Mueller sent one of those cases to, there are 17 cases. We don't even know who all they've been sent to. And she's handling a number of them. That plus John Podesta's good friend who's running the case of Christopher Steele.
Anytime they want...
These judges are crooked.
Yes, and they always send it to her.
Yes, and they are so...
So we're worked up because of the last one that was just sent to her.
So what she did was she basically made Roger Stone into some kind of enemy and tried to hide, and everyone's still trying to hide, the fact that Paul Manafort, yes, he committed some crimes, but he was also set up with Alexander Chalupa's lie from Ukraine saying that he stole $27 million. He was going to go down for that. That was the original conspiracy, folks, was that he, working for the Russians, stole $27 million, I believe it was, from the World Bank through the International Monetary Fund to Ukraine. He supposedly intercepted that when he was working for Viktor Yanukovych. No, he didn't. He was paid $3 million for his work with Yanukovych twice. And the second time he got him elected was even after a color revolution. So they went after Paul Manafort. Yes. And who did that? These judges that Robert Mueller sent this out to, that's where justice went to die.
No, it's where political prisoners wind up imprisoned. And they need Manafort imprisoned as a political prisoner because they believe that he is the one that got Trump elected through the Electoral College. So that they've got to keep him off the playing field.
They have him in solitary confinement so he doesn't tell anybody the tricks he uses to get the Electoral College to follow through on what the law is with their votes. That's what got Trump through the Electoral College. They don't want Manafort anywhere near Trump. If Manafort is not in jail, Trump will be elected. Was Roger Stone a criminal? No. And since Trump was found 100% innocent, why would they be looking at a case of Roger Stone that was subsidiary to it? Why would they be looking at the case of Michael Flynn for lying when he didn't? We now know that even Comey comes out and says that the 302s were lies. So everybody knows that those were lies. Why would we be going after... Why did Rick Gates get off?
Well, who is this we?
The we?
The we. Who's the we going after? Let's be clear who the we is. Those are our enemies. These are the people that are hiding in our government, trying to take it down, running a coup and overthrow of the president.
These are political appointees who are not elected, who are career politicians in the Justice Department and throughout all the different 64 agencies of the federal government, who go there to basically see how they can collect their piece of the pie. And during the previous administrations, the White House was so lawless that everybody got a piece of the pie. If you did something really bad and you lied and you came out and you told the press a big fat lie, they'd give you the Presidential Award given to you by Bruce Orr through the Department of Justice, through their highest ranking review board, and they give you an award each year. And when you get that award, it comes with $35,000.
That's what the senior executive service do for themselves. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So what you need to do, citizens, you just pick up the phone, you call Steve Mulvaney, and ask them to start talking about SES.
So good old Amy Berman Jackson is as crooked as you can possibly get. She tried to do one thing. Once she got my attention, she did something right. But she came back right afterwards and did something so horrible wrong, it was awful. So those 17 cases that have been parceled out to these corrupt judges, we already know the determination of them. We already know they're not going anywhere. We also know that the 13 GRU Russian agents that were indicted by Robert Mueller, they don't exist, and those names were gathered up by John Brennan when he went to Russia before this, and he gave those to Robert Mueller. Those people don't even exist. And they went to who? The Department of Justice National Security Division, where that case will simply die. Now, we're not going to let the Stormy Daniels case die, though Michael Avenatti is as crooked as a dog's hind leg.
You mean the same Michael Avenatti that's been pictured with Alexandra Chalupa?
Yes. And
cozy.
He represented the horrors going after Trump. That case isn't over. Stone's case isn't over. Parts of Manafort's case aren't over. Flynn's case isn't over. And now, exactly as we told you Flynn did a deal. He copped a deal. He took a plea deal because they went after his son. And now he comes out and his lawyer says that's exactly what happened, and that's probably going to get the whole case thrown out. Now, when they threw out the case on Trump, they needed to throw out on all the subsidiary cases, but they won't, and they will never, ever reveal what Robert Mueller was really up to. Remember, we only know of maybe 35 people he interviewed. He interviewed 400. The other 300 and however many, those are the guilty parties, including Joseph Mifsud, Stephen Rowe, including his handler, Arvinder Sambai, including Allison Saunders. They prepared a case which they were hoping that somehow it would either get leaked or released from Robert Mueller with all this damnable information in it. But let's remember, we blew him apart because when he gave out his case, his footnotes were all to what? News reports of BuzzFeed and Washington Post and New York Times. All lies.
How come? I mean, Judicial Watch knows that Alison Saunders, the UK prosecutor, the Queen's prosecutor, had dinner with Bruce and Nellie Orr 4 days before another UK agent, Robert Hannigan, came over to hotwire Trump Towers with John Brennan. Judicial Watch knows all this. How come Tom Fitton is so silent about the United Kingdom connection to all of this?
Because he can't FOIA them, but he did FOIA all of Bruce Orr's stuff.
Well, he FOIA'd that stuff, and we saw in the testimony that they had dinner together.
Oh, totally. And why he doesn't harp on that all the time is beyond me.
But he still does good work in his sphere of the law. Okay, I'll give him that.
He does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes,
thank you, Tom. And thank you, Judicial
Watch.
But
not a lot of
and
strategic
Larry
hitting.
Klayman and all the rest of you guys.
And I'm going to talk about another one. We only have a few minutes now before we wrap it up. All right, Glenn Beck is back at the chalkboards, and everybody will remember back in the mid-2000s, he did these shows and was explaining to everybody George Soros, the land of the lay, Anita Dunn, the whole bit. We enjoyed it. And then in August 2010, a bunch of patriots who all went to D.C. We had a great time for those of you who were there. Remember, we couldn't get the planes to fly over the reflecting pond, but there in perfect formation were the beautiful geese that did it. And I do that because I want people to know that I was there too. I was there in spirit because we were going to take back America. But then now I realized what was going on. They were gathering us up into a hangout, a conservative patriot hangout. Glenn was there leading us. And then shortly thereafter, his show bombed out. It was taken off of Fox, and he started his other thing. And then the next thing you know, he's got his face rolling around in Cheetos as a never-Trumper. And that's it for me with Glenn Beck, because I saw him what he is. He's a propagandist. I wasn't sure at that time who he's shilling for. But as I watch these new chalkboard presentations, I'm pretty well convinced that he is a shill for the Pilgrim Society. Now remember, when I say that, there always has to be somebody out there that is protecting these people from truth, because we know the truth and we're marching forward. And the reason is, if you listen to the last few, he goes into great detail about Joe Biden and the corruption, and that's all good. But what he fails to talk on, just glips right over it, is CrowdStrike and Dmitry Alperovitch. You see, that's what they're not talking about. Another thing that Glenn doesn't talk about, the relationship that we have with Five Eyes. He doesn't talk about Romney's election rigging. There's so much that Glenn does not talk about. So if you go and listen, that's fine. Listen, I found it very interesting. But remember that he's got you in a limited control hangout. He's done it before. He'll do it again.
Yeah, he used to be very exciting because he was revealing things that weren't allowed to be said.
But now he's not revealing, he's controlling the narrative.
And people who take you to that edge make you feel somewhat satisfied because you're already overwhelmed by information and because it's hard to discern in our age of post-truth, our age of falsehood. Then a person like Glenn Beck, you go, well, that's true. Or I can name a half a dozen different news people. Everything they are saying is true. But why don't they take the next step? Just plug it in a Google search. Senior Executive Service. Why that isn't all over the news and people in the alternative news demanding that it come to an end because it basically has taken over our government. And the federal government is not controlled by the president or the House or the Senate or the Supreme Court. Nope, it's controlled by the mechanism of literally 10,000 career politicians, unelected, most of whom are hacks. And the ones at the top are the ones who we notice. People say, don't you trust the FBI, CIA? And no, we don't. And here's the deal, folks. We need to do what you do in a takeover. You say, okay, you're all fired. And to come back, you have to sign a document stating that you don't believe in James Comey and Andrew McCabe and what they did and handing over any information you had, or you can't be rehired. That's standard operating procedure with teachers. We do it all the time, both in public schools and private schools and parochial schools. Fire everybody and hire back the honest ones. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually quite technically legal. All you do is you make it a part of a merit system. So they have to answer certain questions before they can even get back in the door. That's what we need to do to the Senior Executive Service. And those people, as Betsy said, who are taking you to limited hangouts, simply take you there and they hang you out on to be dried like laundry. But what you need to do is make sure to do the work yourself and check out everything they say and go further and find your trusted hangouts where people have told you things that have come to pass because their sources of information are valid. And that's what we're trying to tune you into in all that we do. And we're hoping that you understand that sometimes, yes, we do have to tell you things that Trump is doing that are part of a deal. And he knows full well that what he's doing with a tweet is appealing to a third, fourth, fifth grade level of intelligence. But those are the people, in many cases, who reelect him. So I'm sorry to have to tell you that Trump is a lot smarter than anybody ever told you. He's more than a stable genius. He's a stable genius who uses what's called crazy wisdom. He upsets his other side so that they show you who they are, and then he knows their weaknesses, and then, of course, he uses it to his advantage. That's why we elected him, and that's why we're going to reelect him.